just quickly go through it, that we had the health boards,
Yes.
which evolved into the HSE, and that system had become dysfunctional.
Yes.
And children
No,
were
it's the
dying
wrong
in
system,
care.
wrong system.
Yeah, wrong system. Children were dying in care, and then there was calls for reform, and that reform came about with the setting up of Tusla in 2014.
Yes.
Now, where did it all start to go wrong with the setting up of Tusla?
Now, the person who actually set up Tusla wasn't Alan Shatter.
Right,
The person who set up Tusla was Frances Fitzgerald.
right,
And what she did basically was she took all the old culture and the old system that they said themselves was so wrong within the HSE, and they buried it deeper in Tusla. And you see, what they're doing now is they have a corporate management system with business methods. And you know what really, I mean, it befuddles my mind again. How can child protection be a business?
so it has become a business.
It has become a business, and a lot of people are dependent on this. I've only started to realise this now, just how bad it is. A lot of people are dependent on this business. For instance, you have, first of all, of course, you have the social workers themselves who are dependent on it for a livelihood. You have the whole stream of management going way up, and I think they've managed them for sneezing now at this stage, who are dependent on a whole big, 770 odd million, are dependent on this whole system staying as it is. You have also the Gaels, guardian items, are getting a lot of money out of that.
€125 an hour.
Yeah.
And one of them earned €300,000 for the year a couple of years ago.
I would believe that. And
yes.
you have psychologists, you have counsellors, all tied into this system. They tied them all into this system. And you've also called the legal system. I mean, the legal system's thriving on this. I mean, there was no children being taken into care. I mean, a lot of people would be scratching their heads and saying, how do we earn money out of this?
So it has become adversarial.
And the private foster homes as well.
And the private foster homes. And now we have a situation where there are private companies now who are
yes.
contracted by Tusla
Absolutely.
to foster the children. And one of those is Foster First Ireland. And they are getting €58,000 per child.
Yeah.
And then they place the child in a foster home, and they pay €320 odd to the foster family. So you have
a business. Child protection in this country is a business. Imagine if anybody said that to me years ago when I was starting off, that child protection is a business, I would say, well, I have no business being in a business if that's what child protection is. I'd have gone up and maybe been an entrepreneur or something. You know, I would never have got involved in social work. And the way it is set up now, I would never get involved in it. I would never ever go near social work now the way it is.
Oh, okay, so there are a number of people who have actually called for Tusla to be disbanded, and they have said that it's not fit for purpose. And I know that the recent court case in Galway involving the children that were raped in foster care, the solicitor acting on behalf of those children who are now adults, you know, has put huge question marks over Tusla, and he's just one. The Children's Ombudsman Niall Muldoon has spoken about Tusla. The UN raconteur on children that have been sexually abused who came to Ireland last year, she has issued a report which is hugely critical of Tusla. So I'm not going to go into all of that. So I suppose really what I've heard you saying is that the culture that's in Tusla now is a culture that we have inherited going back to the 1970s.
Yes.
The culture has not changed.
No.
Secondly, you now have a massive business which has been set up, and that business is dependent on the taking of children from their parents.
That's what it seems like to me.
And thirdly, that frontline social workers are no longer able to work as social workers as they would have in your young days.
Yes.
They are now just glorified civil servants.
That's what they are, basically, yes.
Now, the big question, and this is the conversation that I want to have with you, we've established that Tusla is not fit for purpose and there are huge problems with it. And there are people now calling for it to be disbanded. But you and I know that you cannot demolish something without having something to replace it. So what do we replace it with? Now, And this is where we started to argue the other night on the phone. I said that the structure is there and that the structure can be reformed from within, so that if we introduce what I would call ACT, ACT, accountability, that people within the system are made accountable for their actions. C, that competency. A lot of people are employed by Tusla because of who they know and not what they know. So that we need to have a system where people are actually competent to do the jobs they're supposed to do. And thirdly, transparency. There is no transparency. There's no freedom of information, and the family law courts are held in camera. So I'm saying that really our fight now should be to look for all three of those, you know, accountability, competency and transparency, and you disagreed with me.
Well, I disagree with you on the basis that it's the wrong system. So how can you actually reform a system that's the wrong system? My starting point is that you get rid of 3/4 of the management instead of building a whole. Now this is going to be very difficult because people are dependent on their jobs. Some people do their best in that system. I won't say that I'm not criticising everybody. There's some good and bad people in every system, and some people do their best in that system. And I just completely trying to reform a system that's not. The basis of it is not fit. It's not fit to protect children because it depends on, for instance, rules and regulations. There's more rules and regulations than I had hot dinners. I mean, for instance, social workers can't move a muscle without having to cover their tracks. They have to, 80% of it, the time is writing reports and covering their backs, and very little time is given over to actually meeting with families and all that. So they're under huge restrictions in that regard. They're also told what to do. They have to follow set procedures by their management. Even though I might think this is terrible, I can't do this, and I have to go off and say this is the way this should be done, they're told to do it. Make no mistake about it, they're told to do it. And I don't know what they're training social workers in nowadays, but it seems to be very they must be trained in being compliant. That's all I can think, and just follow the rules and regulations. And I think this is a huge problem, because where is the advocacy in all this? Where is the advocacy on helping people to speak out? It's not there because they don't want anybody criticising the system. They do not. And I mean, a lot of people are earning their living out of this system and children being taken into care, then there's something dramatically wrong with it. So I think a lot of the management can go, and yes, do put it outwards instead of upwards. Stretch it outwards and make sure that the bonuses are given to experienced people who want to stay on the front line, and let them do their job as social workers. Let them actually protect children. Now what they appear to be doing, and I can only gather from what I'm hearing, is they appear to be setting up so many systems, so it's a one-fit-all thing. If you lose it, for whatever reason, your children are taken into care, instead of giving them back right away, what they seem to be doing is putting them into foster care, and then making it very difficult for people to get them back. They have all these groups which some place down in Bessborough, is it, that nuns have to make sure you're a good mother, and somewhere else you have to go through a whole series of hoops to get your children back, instead of trying to make sure the children go back straight away and then support them in the home and work them through that. They seem to be making it very difficult even for them to go home. But then if you have contracts with private fostering and all kinds of money and that, then of course you're going to produce the children to give to them. I mean, I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but to me it seems very sinister the way they're approaching all this. I just find the whole thing, where's the community in all this?
Okay.